Rodney Littles, thank you for helping us wrap up the day.
Yeah.
So I hear mobile is a thing that's happening. I don't know if people is this like the hot new thing that's right around the corner?
So it's funny, right? Like, 2009 timeframe, a boss walks me into his office and he shows me a graph on his wall, and he says, "Rodney, what's that a graph of?" And I said, "I don't know." He says, "It's the number of transactions that have gone from a website to a mobile application." He says, "So what does that mean to you?" I said, "Well, you're sending me to mobile training." And here we are.
Fantastic. Well, so what are, besides, I mean, mobile, like that's very broad. That's like saying we're going to talk about, the internet. What are you going to wrap us up with today? How are we going through the home stretch? What are we learning today?
We are going to talk, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen right here.
I believe in you.
Yeah, that's because you don't know how good I am at clicking these buttons. All right, so we'll go ahead and click that button and see if that works. So today I'm sharing. Haha.
Hey, look at that.
So
all right,
today
good.
We're going to
go out on a high note. That's it, everybody.
Have a great day. So we're going to be talking about mobile DevOps at scale. And this isn't going to be. I always struggle with talks like this because people get on the stage or get in front of folks and say, "This is how you do the thing." And to me, it's like there's so many different flavors out there. You got to pick the flavor that tastes best for your team. So today we're explicitly going to talk about mobile DevOps and how to scale a process so that you don't right-click publish because it's technically bad.
Except for if it'll get you where you got to go.
It does get you where you need to go.
It definitely doesn't scale, right? You got to click really fast and a lot.
Yep,
so
yep.
your finger would get tired.
So
we're trying to avoid repetitive stress disorder is what's going on here. It's a health thing. All right.
It is. All right. So we'll go ahead and jump in, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. So I'm Rodney. I'm a senior mobile architect. I'm a maintainer of the Reactive UI project. I'm a functional programming advocate. So I'm one of those functional nut jobs that tells you that you should use observables all the time. And I'm a Microsoft MVP. And these are the places that you can find me on the internet. I like to just get this slide out the way because everyone always wants to know, where can I find you? So there we are. So the definition, kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I've got a high level overview of like what is mobile specific concerns, primarily because we talk about DevOps all the time, and I feel like a lot of the DevOps narrative is given from a web perspective. I'm going to start with the demonstration because the build pipeline takes somewhere around 10 minutes to run, and I don't want to sit there and watch paint dry with you guys on screen.
Even if it's MS Paint, we're not going to watch MS Paint dry. For those of you who have been sticking around all day, we had that a couple ago.
The jokes are real. I love it. So we're going to talk about things like branching, versioning, integration, and deployment, and what those things mean in a mobile world. So I'll go ahead and give you a disclaimer. I always like to give my disclaimer slide. These are my opinions, right? I'm going to be talking from a place of kind of iOS specific, because iOS, in my opinion, has more explicit mobile concerns. Android is a little bit more forgiving when it comes to deploying applications, i.e. you could technically host an Android APK file on your website and people could go download it and install it, but you cannot do that with Apple. So because it's a lot more stringent, I like to talk about it because it's a little bit harder of a process to follow. But again, these are just based on my experiences. This is not, to say that this is the Bible. This is not your normal, DevOps narrative where, where everything is wonderful and everything's great, right? We're going to talk about some of the harder problems to solve as it relates specifically to mobile. This is a quote that I have, who gets on a talk and quotes themselves, right?
I do. I was just going to tell you, I do this in my talks too. So I love it.
I like this guy already. So these are not best practices, right? Just some practices are better than others, right? And that's something I really have been harping on a lot lately, because every time I go somewhere or I talk with developers, they're like, "Hey, Rodney, what are the best practices?" And I'm like, best is a very, very explicit term. That means that there is nothing better and everything else is explicitly worse. I've never found one practice to rule them all in my entire 20 years I've been doing .NET. So one of my close friends and colleagues always talks about you have to be willing to evaluate trade-offs. The work that we do is a system of trade-offs, right? So you can't just say that this is the right way, this is the way, and we have to do it this way. We have to be able to evaluate, is this going to be the best thing for our team? Are we going to be able to use these practices? So as you're looking at this and hearing about all of the things that we're going to talk about today, I really want you guys to listen for things that are good for you and throw away the stuff that doesn't make sense to you. I'm perfectly fine with that. If you get 30% of my talk and you can take 30% and go use it, great. If you can only take 10%, still not mad. It's what works good for you. So right clicking and publishing all the things, right? Like I will go ahead and say that I am more dev than ops. I am not really an ops engineer. I'm a mobile developer, right? I've never seen a Xamarin mobile project in my career that has had a full-time ops engineer that was responsible for getting code from the developer's machine to the testers and or end users. That has always been something that has been the responsibility of the development team. So easiest way to do that, right, is to just download all the certificates and provisioning profiles that you need local to your machine, right click and publish because Visual Studio allows you to do it, right? Well, that's great, but Rodney has to do it, right? Rodney has to have the certificates, which is a security risk. Rodney has to click the buttons, which is not scalable, right? So when Rodney goes on vacation, nobody gets any code, right? And that's not necessarily a great place to be. But understanding that, like, this is what we're talking about today is like, why do we need DevOps in the mobile space, right? And what are the tools that are available to us in that space? So CI is universal, right? We restore some NuGet packages. Maybe we have some locally in our repository. Maybe we have, third-party dependencies that we need to keep. Maybe we have multiple NuGet sources that we need to restore from. We do a .NET build, we do a .NET publish, and our code gets released to the world, right? Well, that's how CI works in a web world, right? And in your typical SaaS model, which is what a lot of people are doing these days, you get your every time that we deploy, everyone is on the most recent version of the application. That is not the case in a mobile world. I can't tell you the number of times where I've gone to my mobile phone and App Store says, "Hey, Rodney, you got 10 apps to update." There's no guarantee that any given end user is going to be on the most recent version of your application. And that alone comes with its own level of concerns and issues. So that's something that we have to be very, very mindful of when we are talking about CI, because we aren't deploying a SaaS product to an AWS or to an Azure. We don't have failovers where we can very easily just click on this button and it'll go back to the previous version. The only way to that I know of, and somebody may be able to tell me that I'm wrong here shortly, the only way that I know of to get this to work is you have to fail forward, meaning you have to go push a binary with the previous version with a new version number that's greater than the version number of the one you want to get rid of. And that's a very cumbersome process, right? So when we're talking about deploying to things like the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store, we really want to make sure that the binary that we release is correct, right? Like, we don't want to get it out there and then realize there's a big problem with it. We want to make sure that we've run it through our gauntlet of tests. We've made sure that everything's, good to go. And we don't want to have to go through a whole process just to go backwards, right? We will always want to fail forward in this new fast-paced CI-driven world. So everything is universal until it's not, right? So I find that mobile is actually very similar to desktop. If anyone's I was going to use a bad term, an old school desktop developer, right? Anyone that knows the old school world of like click once and signing and all that fun stuff, we're deploying binaries. We are explicitly deploying a packaged application, and that's a very tricky thing to do correctly. In the mobile world, we need to support side-by-side installations, right? If I have my development environment and my test environment, and I want to make sure that the hot new feature that we just developed works correctly in dev and in test, I don't want my testers to have to go back behind and uninstall and reinstall. My testers already hate me by nature of the test, developer relationship, right? So I don't want to give them more reasons to hate me. So if they've got to uninstall, reinstall, uninstall, reinstall just to make sure that dev is working like test, we've got a problem. In order to do that in the mobile world, I have to have an explicit what they call in the iOS world specifically a bundle identifier that is explicit to the application that I'm deploying to the device. So I now have to create multiple bundle identifiers, one per environment, so that I can deploy these things side by side, which now immediately increases our CI risk and our landscape, because we now have to make sure that we can support a side-by-side installation from day one. MS Build is the only way to do this from the command line currently. I do believe that's changing with some of the Maui stuff that's coming down the pipeline. But as of now, you can't use the .NET CLI to build a Xamarin application. It just flat out does not work. And the key that I've been talking about is the binaries must be signed in order to be able to be used by even a tester. You can't even deploy an iOS application to a mobile phone that does not pass the signing aspect of the binaries, or doesn't have it, or you don't have explicitly the provisioning information that you need in order to do it. Like even local development can sometimes be a hassle when you're looking at release type builds. So these concerns make mobile somewhat specific, even in the desktop comparison, right? Because you now have this space where you want to support side-by-side installations. You have to have a different binary with a different bundle identifier in order to support that side-by-side installation. And the act of getting it signed is not as easy as you would like. So I think we're just going to kind of jump straight into the demonstration here. I'm going to go ahead and just break things down. So you'll see I've got my my nice pretty iOS simulator, and I explicitly have two different bundled identifier versions right here. And in a perfect world, these would have different names, but again, Rodney.
But we don't live in a perfect world, Rodney. It's okay.
Well,
don't apologize for the imperfection of our world.
Oh, no. I refuse to apologize for the fact that I just didn't do it properly. It's okay. So the important part is I can click on this and you can see, oh, look at me. I've got a nice, pretty hello world. Welcome to Xamarin Forums. And I come here and I've got a perfectly good. And now as a tester, I can verify that, yep, that home screen works correctly across both of these environments, right? But that's not the secret to the sauce, right? I'm going to pull up this code explorer over here. We're going to take a quick little dive into some of what's going on. So again, I'm going to continue to make disclaimers. This is not a talk about a specific technology. I chose a set of technologies, and I'm going to talk about a lot of different technologies that you have available to you. I wrote this sample using a technology called Nuke. Nuke is a C# domain-specific language for build. And I chose it because I do not like YAML. I am not a YAML fan. I would be so happy if the world chose anything other than YAML.
I was earlier today, before I changed into the shirt that I'm wearing, I was wearing my t-shirt that said YAML, and it was yelling at my laptop, which I got from my buddies at Circle CI. So it's a thing that's true.
That seems pretty accurate, right? So for me, YAML is always an exercise in spacing, and I never quite get it right. Is my IDE big enough?
Well, I always said that YAML shows your commitment to precision. So
segue. I chose Nuke. All right, I am being told that I need to make the thing bigger.
Yes, you need to embiggen.
Let's make the bigger.
Hopefully that does
bigger than this.
Yes.
Still not the biggest.
There you go. That's probably embiggened sufficiently.
All right, big. So you'll see here that I extend. So the reason why I chose Nuke is because Nuke is probably not as well known as like a Cake or PSake or some of the other things that are out there. But the main reason why I chose Nuke is because I like it and because it is extensible. So you'll notice that in my Explorer, and hopefully my Explorer window is big enough, and if not, I'll try and make that bigger. Oh no, it won't get any bigger. I made it as big as I possibly could. Layla's probably cursing at me right now. It's okay. So the interesting part about Nuke is that it's a C# application that builds your C# application. So there's a layer of inception here that I absolutely love. You'll notice that my C# application is directly in my IDE. And the reason, back to the YAML bit, why I chose Nuke is because Nuke generates YAML for me from my build script. So I can have a C# build script that I run locally and it will build my YAML for me. So Rodney does not have to throw his laptop halfway across the room every time he pushes to the CI system and something barfs. So, this is a basic build script, right? Nothing special about it. Now, granted, actually, there is some special stuff about it. I am a smart guy, and I try and make the things reusable. So because Nuke is extensible, and there's an extension point in Nuke called this inherit. I can use a default interface implementation to define what my Nuke target. Hey, gets brain. There we go. There we go. This is gonna have to be on every file, otherwise I'm just gonna have.
I didn't really. Yeah, I guess.
How about this? I'm gonna try this real quick. Let's see if we can just make. Just pull this off. I'm gonna just change the font in the middle of the middle of the talk because that's way better for the users than me.
We're just doing it live.
If you don't,
we're talking about cake and pie in the chat right now, Rodney. It's totally fine. Nice. So that said, if you don't, are you team cake or team pie?
Cake. I'm definitely
not a wrong answer.
Well, I have to think.
I mean, the wrong answer is neither, right?
The
wrong answer is like I don't know, scones, I guess.
All right, so I click buttons, and hopefully that makes everything bigger. I'm using JetBrains Writer, and it has a great decompile tool. So you can see that I've got some IO code here that allows me to define what my build target is and define what my build target is in a default interface implementation. And then I'm actually just pulling in my source code from a NuGet package, and I'm able to use that across any build that I want to anytime I want to use Nuke. So again, it's real simple, straightforward. You do a clean, a restore. This is all, CI is universal. You got to restore, you got to build. This is where things start to get weird. You have this step called modifying a plist. There's a manifest type file in iOS called an info plist and an entitlements plist, and you can change things in it depending upon the environment, i.e. the bundle identifier that we talked about earlier. So this step will allow me to do that. These steps are just there because, reasons.
So question in the
Sure.
chat, is this a replacement for MS Build? Nuke?
No, it is not. It sits on top of MS Build.
So it's an abstraction in front of it, right? So for me as a user, it's maybe replacing MS Build, and then I don't have to deal with MS Build. But
right,
it's like almost, if I'm going to totally use all the words wrong. No, I'm not even going to say. I almost said it was going to say it's like sugar in front of, but it's not. It's just. If you're familiar with Cake or Fake or Rake, it is a domain. Nuke is a domain specific language on top of C#, right? So its domain is the domain of build. So no, I'm not getting away from MS Build. What I'm doing is I'm building an abstraction on top of MS Build that allows me to call into MS Build. So in order to archive an iOS application, there are specific parameters that I need to send into every MS Build execution in order to do it. So in my abstraction, I've taken care of that for myself, and all I have to do is make sure that I provided the correct IPA directory and configuration and the Git versions and all of the various things and pieces that it needs in order to execute the MS Build task correctly. So it is syntactic sugar on top of MS Build, and it is. And this is where I love the inception. It is a C# console application that builds my actual application. So it's C# building C#, which is really, really fun to me. So not to jump too far, because this is the
the fun part of the talk, right? So like this is just a basic build.
I don't know what we've been doing before. It's been completely boring and not interesting at all. Now we're gonna have fun.
I mean, at this, I've been having fun the whole time. You've been
Yeah.
cracking jokes. I like to laugh. This has been great. So we'll just try and stay on schedule so I don't get
It's the end of the day.
yanked at the end here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the end of the day. So who's gonna yell at us?
Yeah.
So you'll
Layla,
notice that
probably.
of course.
Oh, she's not.
So you'll see here that I have the ability to set depends on and all the various stuff, right? And then this is the meat of it, right? The output of this nuke script generates this YAML file right here for me. So you'll notice this azure-pipelines.nuke.yaml. This is important. I can run, and I'm going to do it real quick just because, what is a demo without doing something unscripted? I can run nuke locally, right? And pray that it works correctly. I can run nuke locally, and as a developer on this versions application, I can run the build script the way that the CI system will run the build script, right? At least the local portions of it. So now I'm exercising some of the build script and getting an opportunity to allow my build script to have local concerns, i.e. it deploys this YAML file. And then because Azure Pipelines supports templates, it's doing things successfully. I'm gonna go ahead and close that. We'll come back to that in a second.
It's okay. Nobody could see it and nobody could read it anyway.
You're fine. Good. Yeah, it's dirty terminal output. No one wants to see that stuff. You'll see here that I bring that YAML file into my Azure Pipelines YAML file as a template. What does that mean? That allows me the ability to say, these are Azure specific concerns in this YAML out here. And I explicitly wrote some of this in YAML specifically to show this ability. These are my Azure specific concerns out here in this YAML, right? But here inside this nuke pipelines YAML is all going to be things that are going to be specific to my nuke script, right? So my local build script can be local. It can do things locally that the CI server never even knows about. And that's something kind of important to me. So I chose nuke because nuke allows me the ability to generate YAML. I don't like YAML, so it does the YAML for me. This is still kind of doing the thing over here. Ooh, that's the wrong way. Hey, there we go. You can see this nice, pretty debug output now. It's doing things. I'm gonna get rid of this keep promoter X, which I probably should have stopped. So this is kind of the basic gist of it, right? I am very much the build script person. I'm not the YAML person. I prefer to have a local script that developers can run. And I'm going to kind of point out a couple of other random things about nuke that I like and or don't like. I actually don't like partial classes, but in this instance, partial classes are awesome because I'm able to segregate my concerns about Fastlane, which we'll talk about in a minute, and Azure pipelines and parameters all into separate and segregated scripts. It seems like my code is still not big enough for some reason. Let me click buttons.
It can never be.
Right, it's never big enough. I'm going to click more buttons and click save and see if it, there we go. Now it's super huge. Yay. That should be big enough, hopefully. I can segregate the portions of my build that are specific into these partial classes, and it just gives me a level of separation. Again, I'm a developer. I like separation of concerns. Single responsibility is my jam. It's probably the most important solid principle to me and the most violated. So the fact that I can take code level concerns as a developer and apply it to my build script is like mind blown bananas to me. I love it. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm going to point out a couple of other pieces that I think are important for what I consider DevOps at scale. I'll point out that I am using a directory packages prop file. So I'm managing my package versions centrally. So that means that if I work in an enterprise type organization where, open source is not always come grab all of it. It's not a fire sale in open source. You actually have to vet it through a process. This allows a central place where if this file is changed, you can have specific reviewers on your pull requests verify the changes to this file, i.e. the people that are responsible for the governance of what packages get in and don't. So
this is, I just want to speak. This is a big deal. Right. And it's a bigger deal everywhere. So one of the things, just for some context, and everybody might not be thinking about this. So this idea of SBOM, like the software bill of materials, like understanding that there's so much that's been going on. So it's not even just like, Rodney was sort of saying that wait up until recently, we'd be like, okay, some places you're just like, yeah, slurp everything in, whatever. Like nobody can do that anymore. Right. Because we could name half a dozen things in the last 6 months that were rough, like, something that rhymes with polar fins, right? And all sorts of stuff, right? I don't know why I'm not saying it. We all know it.
It's okay.
Reft mad. So having that ability to do that so that you can then put into whatever that process is, and hopefully some type of automated process of some kind, because again, you're tracking all these depths and stuff. So that's really huge to have this in an easy to consume way.
And why it's important to me, that's exactly it, right? Like it's easy to consume. Why it's important to me is this. You'll notice in my actual CS project, there are no version numbers, right? Because I'm sourcing all of that from my global versions. More importantly, I now have a very clear understanding of what's in here. And if I go and like right click in NuGet, add NuGet, or if I use the NuGet command, it will put a package reference in here with a version, and my central versioning will barf at compile time, which means I get an immediate understanding that, oops, Rodney, you're not supposed to touch that without proper information and consent. And if I change that versions file, again, if I go back over here and we go to that versions file, if I change this versions file, the correct pull request reviewers will get a nice big, you are required on this review. Right now we have a level of governance built in around our NuGet package scheme. So while this isn't, mobile DevOps at scale, in my opinion, it is. And this is the only way to truly scale things for large scale applications. Any team over 5 developers will find this invaluable, in my opinion.
I want to point out another thing, just that you said that really resonated to me. That's key, is you're getting that feedback very, very quickly. So I one of the things that always drives me kind of bananas, right, is in whatever our supply chain, like we talked about with whether it's like a supply chain thing like John talked about, or your pipeline or whatever, if there's any kind of validation or test that happens that I don't have the ability to do locally, I, as the person who built that pipeline, am kind of a jerk, right? Because it's like, you got to go this far and then I slapped you down. Right. Yes. And you're like, now maybe you don't do all the right things. That's fine. But I need to at least enable it. So this way you can catch it quickly rather than you did a whole bunch of stuff and then found out, oh, wait a minute, this is all going to fail later. And now I have to go back and undo. So I love it.
Exactly. So and that's exactly why some of the tools that we're going to talk about, like that's why I chose them. I prefer compile time feedback. We're talking about DevOps at scale, right? So you check in code, you push it to the server. You have not been able to run it locally because you've got a YAML pipeline, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room, and the reason why Rodney doesn't like YAML. Most CI systems don't have a local YAML execution platform. More and more are starting to pick up that concern, but a lot of them don't have it, which means I, as the developer on the team, get no feedback of what the CI system may or may not look like. Hence why I like the fact that I can run locally and run the local pieces, right? Like this is a local build, but when I run on the CI system, I get all of this additional CI concerns, right? Yeah. So now I at least get the understanding that I can modify my plist, I can run my fast lane match, and I can build my application, and I have some level of confidence that when it gets to the CI system, it's going to work. Now, let's talk about scalability, and let's talk about, team and being good developers, right? Another thing that I'm going to point out that I have in here. Oh, yeah, I've got it right up here. Hey, there you go. I've got this style cop JSON in here. Yeah, I like code analysis. Code quality, code analysis is a very big part of what we do, in my opinion. It's not so much that I think that the code needs to look a certain way. It's that I think the code needs to be consistent. Right? The code needs to look and feel consistent, regardless of whether or not Matt writes it or Rodney writes it. It should look the same by the time it gets to the system.
It doesn't matter what your standards are. It matters that you have them.
Yes, my friend. Yes. So this enforces a level of standards. And what does that mean? You can run things like JetBrains has a inspect code that you can run on your CI system. That's a third-party tool that you have to run against your code in order to get it to work. I'm going to point out that I prefer static analysis for this reason, right? And now I feel like we're not going to end up getting back to the slides, and I'm just going to end up going through all the slide information right here, which is fine with me. I'll point out that I think additional white space is the devil. I think it's horrible. I think it's the worst thing ever, right? Look at this.
So tell me how you feel about Python then.
That's a conversation best had over beers, my friend. We'll talk about that another day.
That doesn't go on the stream.
Yikes. So you'll notice I added a single line, and now I have this nice pretty red error up here, and the code is telling me my code styling will not allow this. If I try and run my application right now, it will not compile. That is instantaneous feedback to the developer that we are not following the code standards. Now, let's talk about why this is good and why this is bad. Yes, it can, emphasis on can, slow down your development cycle, but it will increase your build cycles. When you don't have to run a third-party tool, when you get compile time feedback, you're not wasting 30 minutes for inspect code to run on a server and then find out, oh, resharper failed, got to go rerun it, right? Again, we're talking about scale. Scale is about throughput. Scale is about getting things faster to more people. If the developers take the hit, and this is the other thing, at a certain point when you have the static analysis, your developers won't even notice it because they will be so ingrained in what it is, they'll be able to blow through all the static analysis without a problem. It'll become second nature to them, and they'll be resolving it without even having to hit this nice, pretty context menu that it gives you, right? So now, there we go, Roslyn. So now I've removed my blank line, and now my build will execute again. These things are important to me because I like code cleanliness. I like consistency in the way that I look at my code. So static. So I don't care whether or not you use a third-party tool like JetBrains or you use static analysis. I will tell you, you use it. You use it because it is the right thing to do, and because your code base will be better for it, right? And that is a very important thing for us as developers. And it may not matter to you, the developer today, but imagine when you roll off the project, or when you find a new position, or when you leave the company, right? That next developer, I know there's developers right now that are cursing my name for code that I wrote 15 years ago. And I'm okay with that, right? Because I've grown since then. So I apologize for any of you that are supporting an application that I wrote. I knew what I knew at the time. So these things are important when we're talking about team sizes over 5, right? When you have 5, 10, 15, 20 developers, and I've seen most Xamarin projects range anywhere between 1 and 10 developers. I have seen Xamarin projects of over 25 developers. That's a lot of developers to be in a mobile code base. So having consistency, having the ability to get the feedback directly and not waste time building on the CI system is extremely important to me. Again, these are my experiences and my practices and my beliefs. Another thing that we'll notice here, and I'll kind of segue into this, and maybe I should probably pause, Matt, and ask, are there any questions out there in the chat?
I haven't really seen any questions.
Perfect.
More comments, and that's it. You know what? Here's the thing. This is the beautiful thing about virtual conferences versus in person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in an in-person conference, like, what's the most annoying thing is, well, this is more of a comment than a question, and you're like, but like in the chat, we want all of that. We want the comments and the questions and all the stuff. It's absolutely beautiful. But so I am curious, and we do have Fuel Stable said, used to be a code style believer. I am no longer a believer. So I don't know if those are, again, these are right here, like to quote my favorite Peloton instructor, Rodney is here to make suggestions. You make decisions, right?
Right. Back to the beginning of the talk with that discllaimer, right?
Yeah.
It may not apply to you. It may not apply to your team. For me, it does. For me, it's a staple. It keeps things consistent, especially when we're talking about. I do a lot of open source work, and this is actually where I got into it. Is consistency when somebody checks in code, that's not familiar with the code base as well. So I'll take this segue real quick to point out that I have this options bit. So to all you web folks who have been using all the new .NET Core nice hot stuff for the past, what are we on 7 years of .NET Core at this point? Maybe 8.
Jeez.
Right? Right. You guys may look at this and be like, "Oh, Rodney, there's nothing impressive about that." But anybody out there that's a mobile developer, when I show you that I can take an app settings.json that's in my Xamarin application, and I got some code over here that I'm going to show you. Hopefully it actually does the thing that I expect it to. Yeah, here we go. And I can configure these options, right? And I can use I can use the new Microsoft dependency injection. I'm explicitly using it because it allows me to dig into the configuration. I can use the new Microsoft dependency injections in a Xamarin application and get out anything that's in either my app settings.json, or if I need something specific at the platform level, I have this iOS app settings. I can pull all of that directly into my code, and I can use this iOptions concept and get access to any level of configuration that I want. 5 years ago, and when I first started Xamarin, this was not a possibility. You couldn't do this. This is something that's emerged in like the last 2 years. So again, this will come up when I show the actual build sample. But this is important. So okay, I'm looking at the time. So we're gonna do this real quick.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
Do this. We're gonna go to our terminal and we're gonna clear our terminal. Hopefully.
We have a question though.
Uh-oh.
Even though we got all excited, we're coming to a screeching halt to answer Layla's question. How does Maui factor with everything that we've discussed? Also, what the hell is Maui?
Maui is the evolution of Xamarin Forms. So Xamarin Forms is being pulled into the .NET, into .NET proper. It is becoming a first-class citizen. It is going into the system namespace. It is going into the system namespace as system.maui. Maui is the next generation of Xamarin, and everything that I'm showing you here should work in the Maui world. There's actually a tool that I'm going to talk about a little bit later that I know for a fact works in the Maui world. There's not a lot of change in the project structuring from Maui, so there are going to have to be tweaks. But overall, everything that I'm showing you today works tomorrow when Maui drops. That's probably like the number one question I get these days is Xamarin dead? Xamarin is not dead. It is just changing form, right? Matter is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form, right? So let's embrace this change, people, because Maui is on its way.
It's the laws of DevOps thermodynamics. Okay, we got it.
Oh man, we were having fun. So I've got this. Matt, I think you have access to my links. So if you wouldn't mind dropping the link. Maybe you don't. I will. Well, no,
I have access to your links. The problem is I don't have access to put them into all the chat. So,
no.
We'll get it. No. It's handled. Don't even sweat it. Which link do you want?
The link to the code on GitHub, the versions code on GitHub. So we're gonna do.
I got it. We'll get it there. We'll get it there.
We're gonna do a live dry fire exercise. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna change. I'm gonna change the README. So git status. We are going to git add read. Oh, wow. I can't see the bottom. How about this? Let's try this again. I cannot see git add readme. All right. So git commit live. This is not.
I hope you're all noticing that Rodney has a mechanical keyboard.
Oh yeah. My microphone is right next to it. So
No. It's a thing. People are into it.
I saving my fingers for another day, man. I want to be able to write code until the day before they put me in the dirt. Yeah. Oh, the repo is private. That's because I like to write code in solidarity. And hold on.
Hey, nobody can file bugs if they can't get at the repo.
Yeah, Well, I always start with private repos now that GitHub supports it.
Now that you don't have to pay for them.
Versions. Yeah, there we go. So let's go ahead and again, let's do all the things live, right? It's private. So let's go down here to the danger zone and change visibility, change to public. Come on, you can do it. Make it public. Come on, you can do it. Rodney, you can copy and paste things. All right. Confirm my password. Please don't do two-factor. Okay, we should be public. All right, so now that the link is posted and it's public, everyone can see Rodney's horrible code. Great. So now that we've committed, let's do git push origin, and notice that I'm committing directly to the main branch because I'm a great developer.
Because YOLO.
I mean,
git commit YOLO.
I mean, I have force push to master on occasion. I don't recommend it, but in dire straits, do what you got to do. So now what that should do is kick off some CI stuff. So let's go ahead and pull this over and look at the thing. We'll go ahead and increase. Let's do control plus all the things. So now you'll notice that, that might be too big. There we go. That seems big enough. You'll notice that I've even though I'm pushing to GitHub, my pipelines are in Azure DevOps, and I'm explicitly using this our little versions. So if we refresh, hopefully we will see. Haha, we have a build going. So I just wanted to prove that pushing code to GitHub gets it there, and with that commit is all of the links that are going to be relevant to this talk. So they're right there on the README for everybody out there to see them right now. That way, Matt, you don't have to worry about posting them throughout the rest of the talk. I figured I'd give you.
There you go. Look at that. Look at that.
Trying to be a good citizen, right?
Yeah.
So, the important thing here is that now I'm building. So we'll come back to that in a moment, and continue on with our source code and talking through some of these things. And it's funny because I had a whole slide deck built, and like now I'm just kind of going off the top of with all of.
That's how we do, man. It's just like,
yeah, it is.
We're just riffing.
It's DevOps. You got to be. So the important part about that is that like going back to what I was talking about earlier in some of the tools, right? So iOS has a very specific concern where you have to create an Apple-specific certificate and Apple-specific provisioning profiles, and you have to do everything Apple's way, or they tell you cannot play in our sandbox. Apple is ridiculously particular about these things.
It's a very nice sandbox. It has a good payload and a rake and stuff. So you got to keep up the riffraff, I guess.
Oh my God, the jokes are too much for me right now. Yeah, so it's because it's the design of their sandbox is superior to everyone else's, even though everyone else's was created 10 years ago and they're just coming out with their sandbox. Yeah. It's better and way more nice. Anyway, so because Apple is that way, I employed a tool called Fastlane, and the link should be on that README in that repository. What Fastlane allows me to do is it automates the creation, the consumption of those certificates. Anyone that's done mobile will tell you, like in the early days of mobile, before tools like Fastlane existed, like creating a provisioning profile was something that took you the better part of an afternoon, and you have to change the provisioning profile every time you add more testers to be able to test your application. So now you're wasting an entire afternoon every time you get a new iOS device to test with, or every time you have tester turnover, or every time that the CEO gets a brand new iPhone and he wants to be included. Every single time, that would take you at minimum an afternoon to go and rehydrate all those certificates. Fastlane does it for me in a matter of minutes. So I use Fastlane for that reason, because it has always been a great tool. I'm going to point out that Fastlane has a tool called Fastlane Match, and it has actually an entire suite that will let you do all forms of deployment. But Fastlane has a tool called Fastlane Match, and what I'm using is Fastlane Match, and I'm specifically using the Amazon S3 offering for it, that will go and generate my Apple certificates. It will generate my provisioning profiles. It will store them in a place that is accessible to anyone that has the proper keys. Now we're talking about scale. Why is that important? If you have 5 developers on your team and all of them need access to the certificates and all of them have to install it on their local machine in order to be able to, do release debugging, being able to do this in a systematic and distributed way is extremely important. So Fastlane is, in my opinion, an invaluable tool to be able to get there. It has way more to it than just Match. About recording.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Okay. Yes, no worries. Good. Okay. Yeah, reading is fundamental, and I shouldn't do it while I'm talking. Yeah. So it's an invaluable tool. It allows me to, again, these are the bundle identifiers. So it allows me to say across these different, so I have one for production and one for dev, because I'm cheating and making it simple. This isn't a full scale implementation. It'll let me set the output directory for where I drop those provisioning profiles. It lets me configure all manner of things right here in this match file. And then all I have to do, going back to my code, all I have to do is run Fastlane Match with the arguments that I want, and it will go off and do the thing, right? So I literally just call Fastlane. If you're using any of the modern CI systems, I would say the majority of them have Fastlane pre-installed for you these days. I didn't have to install it as part of the Azure DevOps bits. I did have to set up a keychain for Azure DevOps, so we'll talk about. So like that's where again Apple is extremely persnickety when it comes to things. You have to build it on a Mac environment, and you have to use Apple keychain, and you got to do all the Apple things the Apple way. Otherwise, you can't play in the sandbox. So again, I use Fastlane, and explicitly on the CI system, so my nuke script is running a different concept locally than it is on the CI system. So locally, I run this match target, but on the CI system, I run this Fastlane target, and the Fastlane target is running something completely different, and it explicitly has the setup keychain. Earlier in my terminal output, that wasn't a thing for the local build. So Fastlane allows me the ability to handle the provisioning of an iOS application, i.e. the code signing, very, very easily, consistently, and at scale. Anyone that has access to the correct passwords and secrets can get to it, which means you can just pass the passwords and the secrets around the team, and everybody gets access to it, and you don't have to worry about going and manually doing all those things. You can manually do it. It's not that you can't, but in my opinion, it's not the path to success. Again, this is about scalability. We want to be able to do things quickly. Let's go back and check to see whether or not our build is complete. It probably is not, but we're going to check anyway, just to be sure. Oh, maybe we're not going to check if we can't find the right button to click. Oh, it's still going. So while we're talking about it, right? So again, this is how Nuke outputs to my console, or to my console in Azure DevOps. It is a single job. By default, Nuke doesn't do that. Nuke actually does a job per task. Again, I told you earlier, Nuke is extensible, so I extended Nuke and Nuke allowed me the ability to say, "Hey, run all of these as one job." So we'll click into that job, and we'll see that that we're doing, the simple .NET Core SDK. We're populating our app settings. So again, where I was telling you that we were substituting that app settings.json, that's something that 5 years ago you could not do in Xamarin. So this is a really big step in the right direction. My clean stuff, my modify plist. So again, I'm coming in here, and if I can find it, my target at the bottom, right? I'm actually changing the bundle identifier in that manifest file to be my production one, right? And I'm giving it the short version. So now this is a iOS specific thing. So I'm going to talk to all the iOS folks or anybody that might be doing iOS in the future, because this confused me so much. This CF bundle short version is the overall application version, right? So your 1.1, 1.1.1, right? This CF bundle version is a more specific version. Why does this matter? When you push to things like TestFlight or the App Store, you need this version to be incremented every single time. Otherwise, Apple will reject your binary and you can't play in the sandbox. Again, this is all about playing nice in the sandbox with Apple. So this is the public version that people will see on the App Store, and this is what Apple will see when they go and verify that your IPA does what it's supposed to do. So again, I have this Fastlane step. I set up a keychain. I ran Fastlane. Everybody's happy. Everybody's good. So we're going to kind of come back to this a couple of times throughout the remainder of the time. I see we're running up against time now. So let's continue, right? So let me just go check my slides to make sure that I've covered all the important things. I haven't. So things like I haven't covered like half of what I wanted to talk about. Such is the nature of this.
That's all right.
I don't care.
We're all things. We know things we didn't know before, right?
So yeah, exactly. So things that we talk about in terms of like scalability when it comes to mobile apps is like branching strategies. A lot of the times, a lot of the projects I have used like a Git flow. Where you have like a proper main line, you have a development channel, you can do hot fixes and releases. That has value, but in the new world that I like to live in, where we build a binary one time and deploy everywhere. And this is, I guess, an important step back, right? Why does that matter? The conversation always comes up, hey, Rodney, if you rebuild, you're technically deploying a different binary to different environments. And the answer to that is yes, you are. How do you avoid that? There is a technique, and again, there's a blog post by Dan Causer about building once and deploying everywhere. right? Basically, what we want to do is we want to build the binary one time, then we want to, at release time, we want to grab it, we want to unpack it, we want to change the things that we want to change, repackage it, re-sign it, and then ship it to the correct environment. So that's that is a way to get around that conversation. If that is a concern, if that is a trade-off that you have to live with in your environment, that is a way. But so if you're not concerned about that, Git flow works perfectly fine. I prefer mainline development. I know a lot of people will say mainline development doesn't work for mobile. It does. You just have to be really, really diligent. Use things like feature flags. I've seen team collaborative work. But there's all of these various, and there's also a blog post on there from Martin Fowler specifically on branching strategies.
I was just going to say it probably is. I remember Jess Humble when we would talk about coming back to main like that, trunk based development. He said people would tell him, "Oh, it could work at our org. We're too big." And he's like, "Have you heard of a tiny little company called Google?" Right. So there's all sorts of reasons that whatever. Every snowflake has six sides, my friends.
So that's the conversation about trade-offs, Matt, right? Like you can sit here and give me 800 reasons why this won't work in your organization, but I'll ask you flat out, have you tried?
Right.
Are you willing to fail to prove me wrong? That's the number one thing. I want developers to prove me wrong. I want you to take this and say, Rodney, this won't work in my organization, and implement it and prove to me that it doesn't work. I don't know. I mean, you might be surprised. I've been surprised because I've taken that challenge more times than I care to count. In my, as a matter of fact, Fastlane is a tool that I found specifically because that someone was like, "Oh, Rodney, you can do that with Fastlane." And I was like, "That's too much."
Like the heck you say,
right? Like, and now I'm like, "Ooh, Fastlane, all the things."
Yeah.
But branching is a very important thing because branching dictates how fast we can submit our code. And when you're dealing with having to ship binaries, having to ship a binary every time a developer commits code to the main line, you want that process to be as quick as possible. You want to get it into your testers' hands as quick as possible. Now, again, a lot of this is going to depend on testing. This is kind of like the untold story, in my opinion, in all the DevOps talks that I see. Testing, automated and manual, is imperative for a fail fast approach. And if you do not have a good testing strategy, then your CI implementation will suffer as a result. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Like if your testers aren't testing every commit that hits that main line, or at least or have a chance to test every commit that hits that main line, eventually you're going to get to the point where your main line is quote unquote unstable. And it's because you haven't committed your testing resources to testing the most important branch in your entire repository. So, again, there's no real right way to do this, wrong way to do this. There are techniques and trade-offs. Again, you have to the reason why I posted that Martin Fowler blog is because there's so much good information. Like that's a wealth of information for you to figure out what works for your team. Read it, find what works for you, use it. But what I have found is that small integration points is the best. Frequent commits are the best. If you can get a feature in a half a day and ship it to the main, or you can get a bug fix in a half a day and ship it to the main line, that is ideal. Again, we're talking about continuous integration, right? CI at scale. Like CI talks about integrating. Integration is the first point where all of these various developers across your team's code is coming together and playing nice together, right? And let's be honest, we sometimes as developers have conflicting requirements. My code may be in direct conflict with Matt's code, and as a result, depending upon who hits the integration environment first, one story may pass, one story may fail. Does that mean that it's wrong? No, it means that we have an environment, we have a process that allows us to fail quickly and get that feedback quickly, as opposed to getting all the way to the app store, which I will tell you, I have waited upwards of a month during peak time getting my app reviewed by Apple. I mean, one Christmas, we were trying to ship a Christmas release, and we got the approval to ship the Christmas release 5 days after New Year's. Yay. So great. I was in a lot of trouble that day, but it wasn't my fault. Apple has processes and there's nothing you can do about it. So understanding how to branch our code gives us a better understanding of how we can integrate the code. I won't talk about the best practice. I will tell you there are some bad ways to do it. I told you earlier that I have YOLO force push to master. It is not recommended. It is not ideal. Rewriting history is a bad idea. Retargeting master is a bad idea. Masters should be your source of truth. It should be the one branch in all the branches that not only compiles, but should execute the application without concern. Creating branches from different branches is like if you're creating branches from other branches and you're not pulling previous code from the main into that branch, I'm going to tell you, you're probably doing it wrong. Cherry picking is a tool you can use, but using too much cherry picking results in branches that diverge too much. And anytime it's funny, I saw a tweet the other week that I couldn't find when I was trying to put this talk together, but it talked about like branch divergence isn't linear, it's exponential. So the more we cherry pick across multiples of branches that have not been kept up to snuff with the main line, we are basically setting ourselves up for what I like to call get wrecked. Right? Because you're going to get to the point where Git can no longer tell you whether or not, a branch can be properly pruned. It's not going to, you're going to have branches that are up, down from main in various ways. And it just becomes really, really bad. So you definitely want to branch appropriately. Versioning is an important thing. As a developer, I use a lot of software. And I'll point out here that I'm using a tool in this called, if I can find it, it's in here somewhere. I have it. Version. Yeah. Git version allows me to version my application. I have not gotten it to do year-based, but JetBrains Rider is a year-based versioning scheme. For stable applications, I'm really starting to like that year-based versioning scheme. But more and more, semantic versioning seems less and less appealing for large-scale application development. But right now I'm using Git version. Git version supports semantic versioning. And if we go back to my build, which should now be done. Come on, Rodney, you can click the buttons.
Got a couple minutes.
Yeah, I know. I'm watching the timer. Is that really? Oh my goodness. No, okay, no. Yeah, it's still sitting there. Wow. Of course. While I am on camera and while I did not sacrifice to the demo folks this morning. That's what the problem is. This was only taking a couple of minutes before. The majority of my other pulls were only 7 minutes, 10 minutes tops. So we'll go to our previous one and just kind of talk through what it's doing. Again, like I said, it's doing all the normal stuff where you have to clean and restore that you would see in any other .NET application. But we're getting here where we need to run Fastlane, right? I'm going to show you what Fastlane's output looks like. No, can we get this to go? Can I just make this smaller? Will it let me? It won't. There we go. I can click that button. Nope, that's not the right button. See, clicking buttons is a bad thing for Rodney. So Fastlane will allow me to provision my iOS application. And it does all the hard stuff. Like you'll see right here, it's grabbing the correct team ID from my Apple Developer Portal. So it's connecting to the Apple Developer Portal for me. It's getting the correct provision profiles and application identifiers. It's installing the certificate locally on my keychain. And then it's using that to sign my application, right? So it's telling me about that I've got an Apple distribution certificate, and it's doing all the needful things that need to happen. Then it's going back and archiving my IPA, and eventually what this build will output, it will be in my publish directory, in my drop folder. I'll get this nice versions IPA, which then segues quite nicely into the release, right? So again, I'm using release pipelines. Oh, yep, I've got redness, all the redness. It's no big deal though. It's red for a reason because I don't know how to bash. Again, I told you I'm more than ops. so it's failing on re-signing the IPA. But what this is showing is that I have two different jobs in my release pipeline, and I'll go ahead and edit this pipeline real quick so we can see it. You'll notice here that on my integration, which is just my development, I just have the task that ships it to App Center. So that way we can use it. App Center is another tool that is important in the distribution setup, because again, you can't just post it to a website and get testers to come download it, you have to go through a distribution mechanism. App Center is the continuation hockey app. You can use things like TestFlight for this. I find that TestFlight and Apple's suite is a little bit too heavy-handed for simple things like testing, and Microsoft owns App Center, so it makes it very, very simple for someone like me to go and do things like this. Let's go grab that and let's create a new, and let's paste that in there. Right. So you'll notice that as part of my continual pipeline, I can go all the way from my GitHub repository to my check-in to my release. And now I've got a binary that I can download directly from App Center and give it to my testers. They can install it on a device. It's got a specific version number. They can see that version information, and we can test these things in any given environment side by side. So this is a very important step of the process that is specific to mobile, i.e. if you've got a website, you just deploy it to Azure and you're good to go. You can get it to go to any website, any web address, but you have to have a specific distribution system when it comes to mobile. So I know I am at time and I didn't get through all of the fun things, but
those slides are all available on your repo, so people can kind of step through and see the things you talked about and check out the repo.
Because slides are boring anyway, right? No one wants to sit here and watch me go through slides. Everyone wants to see code, right?
Yeah, we did. This was exciting. I don't know. I dug it. This was a lot of fun, and I learned a bunch of stuff I didn't know anything about. And we all know that really the entire reason I'm doing this is so I can stick up to like my telling Layla that I was going to learn about .NET this year. So things are starting to happen. Things are starting to happen. It was awesome, Rodney. Thanks for a great time.
No, thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk about to mobile DevOps. Like I said, DevOps is something that, like, I'm a closet DevOps guy. I love it. I think it's the best thing ever. I remember when all you could do was right-click and publish from Visual Studio, or back in the olden days where you used to have to copy code. No, not even. So I worked at a place where we literally would right-click, copy, and paste onto production servers.
Yep.
Oh my God, it was the worst experience
I've
ever.
been there. I've been there.
Yep. So having consistency is one of the big things. The last point that I will make, because I know I'm at time, is this. Continuous integration is synonymous to continuous improvement. The number one thing that I see people fail at, and I'm going to use that term fail at in the world of CI, is I've got a build system. Why do I need to change it? Right? We should always be striving to make it better. Just like we always want to refactor our code, we always want to look at the long pole in the tent, look at what's taking the longest to complete in our CI system and make it shorter, right? Because that scalability is what we're really talking about. Getting code to our end users, to our testers as quickly as possible, failing as fast as possible, and completing that cycle and that feedback cycle as quickly as possible.